Bonjour à tous, je suis ravi de vous retrouver pour une vidéo très spéciale puisqu'il s'agit d'une interview. Et quelle interview? L'interview de Mattias Johnsson, donc l'un des créateurs de Symbaroum. J'ai eu beaucoup de chance. Il m'a accordé plus de 1 heure et demie de son temps libre pour discuter de la genèse de la gamme, de différentes questions qui m'avaient été données et que je me posais moi-même à la fois sur le processus créatif, la campagne du Trône d'Épines et des éléments très plein de spoilers qui divulgagent beaucoup de petites informations sur le monde, ainsi que le futur de la gamme, ce qui est assez exceptionnel, je dois avouer, et j'en suis très très heureux. Donc sans plus attendre, je vous propose cette interview de l'un des co-créateurs de Symbaroum.
Okay, so well, let's start then. My name is Thomas. I have like a small YouTube channel about tabletop RPG, mostly the one I'm playing. So that would be like Warhammer and Symbaroum, because I played through the entire campaign of the Throne of Thorns for 2 years now. We finished in last March, I think. It was quite the adventure, especially since, well, you sometimes you had to organize the epicness of the campaign mounting up. So I wanted to take this moment with you to either discuss some question I had or the question from French players, because
Yeah.
unfortunately my players, being very shy, they didn't give me anything, but I asked on French Symbaroum Discord
Mm.
and on some forums, and people were kind enough to leave questions. The easiest one, I guess, it's like, what were your inspirations for Symbaroum? Because we, as French people, do not know much about the background of Wielda,
Ah,
Dragonbane, and
mhm.
so
Yeah, but you do know about Dragonbane.
yeah,
So
it's
I
coming up.
can I can tell you that the company I founded together with a few friends back in, I think it was 2012 or 13,
Hmm.
was called Järnringen.
Hmm.
And it consisted of like the core of the creative team of a previous iteration of the Järnringen company who did role-playing games only in Swedish. So we did a previous version of what became Mutant Year Zero. Our version was called Mutant Heirs of Doom, and as I said, only released in Swedish so far. Um, and then we created an original IP named Coriolis
Yeah.
that we later sold to. Well, it went from hand to hand and ended up with Free League eventually. So this was 2012. Me and some of my friends were on a role-playing game trip to Istanbul,
Hmm.
sitting in the shade of the Blue Mosque, and had tea and biscuits. And one of the guys said that because we had sort of dismantled the first iteration of Järnringen, and he asked us basically, can you live without making role-playing games? And we were like, mid-careers. We were starting families, and just thinking about having a hobby again that consumes hours upon hours upon hours was like far-fetched. But there was this question of making a fantasy role-playing game, because fantasy is like where we come from basically, and maybe that is why we hadn't made a fantasy role-playing game before, because it felt a little bit daunting, and how can we like stand out from all the other brands out there. So the basic point of departure when we started, because I told the guys right from the start that I don't have time for a hobby. So if we're going to do this, let's try to make it for real. Let's aim for an English translation and see where that takes us. And when we started working, the point of departure was actually much like when we did Mutant Heirs of Doom. We built on the experience we had playing previous versions of that game. So in the case of Symbaroum, it started out as spitballing around the continuation of a role-playing game campaign that we had run in Dragonbane, or in Swedish, Drakar och Demoner, because this was before Dragonbane even was a thing, translation. So that is absolutely where we started, and we had like a full day when me, Mattias Lilja, and Martin Grip, the artist, sat in Mattias Lilja's apartment, and I think for 6 or 7 hours just Googled art and images and inspirational stuff, and we collected the things we found cool and interesting in a folder, and then that became the basis of where we wanted to go with this game. We wanted it to be reflect, of course, our own experience from younger years, but we also wanted to take it in a little bit more serious and a little bit darker and narrative oriented direction. So there is basically, even if we didn't say it back then, it was then and there that we basically decided that Symbaroum was going to be deeper, darker, and deadlier compared to other popular fantasy role-playing games. Having played Dungeons and Dragons, of course, and Warhammer, and Ars Magica, and basically you name it, we tried it in the 80s and 90s, and even played longer campaigns in many of these fantasy RPGs. So yeah, that was a really long answer on a very simple question, but I think it's important, for me at least, for you to know like the background to basically what I'm saying is that, and this is maybe also an advice for others who want to do their own role-playing games, is dig where you are standing, because you cannot make a game that other people enjoy, I believe, if you don't really enjoy it yourself in terms of reading, working with it, and also playing it. So yeah, we started in like our own preferences and went from there. And then, of course, there are some evident points of reference that people make, and that we sort of discovered along the way, that we were heading in the direction of Princess Mononoke, for instance, and other, critiques of civilization, where you have the tension between the civilized and nature, and what happens then when the civilized comes stomping in to nature and tries to bend it to its will. The Game of Thrones reference is maybe not as evident, because Game of Thrones do not have a monopoly on human-centric and more serious, I was about to say political, but at least, this moral ambiguity and perspectivism, where there is basically no obvious or objective good or bad, but you have good and bad, but it's all a question of perspectives fighting each other, viewing each other as bad, right?
Yeah, the idea that political bickering, personal power plays end up being nothing in the grand scheme of things, because there is such a threat with the darkness and the Simba, like the the others in Game of Thrones, where when they're just going to come down, well, everyone is going to shiver together, so it doesn't matter what is your allegiance.
Exactly. But then also, all these bickering factions having vastly different ideas about how to deal with that threat, and what to do with it once it's conquered. So yeah, as a social scientist myself, I really enjoy working with Symbaroum because it lets me sort of I saw, because we can reveal to the audience that you sent me some questions in advance. I didn't really ponder them, but I just looked at them and saw that this will be an interesting discussion. So what is so cool with Symbaroum is that one of your question was like, what is the biggest influence or inspiration when it comes to Symbaroum as a whole and the adventures and in particular the Throne of Thorns, and it's might be obvious to some or to everybody that it's basically our world, right?
Mm.
Trying to say something that is of relevance for us in our daily, because I think that is very important for even in a fantasy setting, that it needs to be relatable, even if it's not on a conscious level, but on some level that it's possible to understand what it's all about, what's at stake, and then as a player character being able to. There's a Swedish expression. It's called "spela roll." Spela roll. It means literally playing a role, but it translates more to matter, to be of significance in a setting, whether it's in our world or in the role of your player character. So that's also something that we had as an ambition from the very beginning, that whatever we did, we wanted to make sure that the players and their characters had agency, had a possibility to actually influence the development of the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that shocked me at the end is like when we arrive at the final step of the campaign, let's say, and there's a critical choice that I'm not going to dive into too much. I remember my players actually who were from different factions. So I had a witch, I had, a Templar who was reformist, yet, he was try to get like he wanted to stay on his fence and like why can't we all be friends? And then I had an ogre who was backed up by the Ordo Magica. I was one of the sappers, right? And he was very narrow thinking. And then I think the last one was just your average barbarian ranger who happens to be like one of the last guys from from the Desira clan, the one who were just crushed and
Yeah.
lived on
Yeah.
the Thistle Hold before.
Yeah.
And it was like, and this, I swear to you, I'm a very, let's say, fast-paced game master, and they spent 2 hours debating what should they
I
do,
love it.
who they should ally with, because of course, when you see the Secret of the Old Blood at the end, and they're like, no, those are the bad guys, and then they're like, well, yeah, but maybe Esmeralda is not that bad, because as a GM, when you read her background, it's like it's just a girl grieving for a mother in a way, and she cannot accept it. And it was really, really fun. At the end, I was like, and at the end, I think one of the guys just said, okay, fuck it. I'm going to run for the temple where there's like the teleporter to go to our Eru. And, if you're not with me, then too bad for you. Do what you want. And stuff, because it was such a stalemate. Like they could not find a consensus. Like it was really interesting.
And there was no faction that they sort of trusted
The
to
witch,
ask. Yeah, the witches.
but the witches were, at the end of the game, they kind of like there is a handful of them. There
Yeah.
is the Hudra, there is the shapeshifter, and that's it. No, I mean the
No,
reformist.
I mean, if you have a group of
Yeah,
players that actually can pull that off in character to have that discussion, then that's super. We played. You mentioned Warhammer. We played The Enemy Within a couple of times, and one of the times we had we there was so much role play and discussions that we barely made any progress at all. But it was still one of the most amazing role playing games experiences that I've had to date. So yeah, I was also going to say, it's sort of in my defense, that often if the players end up in those kinds of situations, there are often non-player characters that they can turn to, at least for advice. And that is something that I think is important, to provide that tool. But again, for gaming groups that don't need it, all the better for you.
No, it was, yeah, no, it was definitely quite the experience at the end of a 2-year campaign where you're like, okay, I'm sure everything is set up. They're going to do this and that, and then you will have the big finale, and they're like, nope, let's think about it for now. And you're like, okay, well, let's just roll with it and we'll see what happens. Another question I had actually is more about the campaign itself. Like, did you set up very early in the conception process, like the main stepping stone of the story of the plot? Because like you were talking about the enemy within, and it's kind of infamous for that, where they just went as they, which it's a great campaign though, but it's like just little blocks, independent, and they're like kind of tied together at the end, but barely. So
the big milestones and the vistas, or the scenery where that would be the main focus of each episode, was actually decided, or at least preliminary, before starting to write Thistlehold. So and we actually, when we released Thistlehold, the first book of the campaign, we also released a PDF that is sort of summarizes the whole plot. And we, over the years, we had to make some changes to that PDF, because and the cool thing for me when embarking on that epic, story arc, is that when you have set the tone and you have decided what factions are in play and whatnot, what the ultimate goal is, you can let yourself more or less discover the turn of events. So working on the books, we did make some changes. One of the first obvious one is that we had to rename the Sovereign's Oath, that was initially called the Blood Oath, I think. And then I just discovered that I was wrong, because it would be stupid and difficult for the gaming groups to have the Sacred of the Old Blood and then the Blood Oath. So that is one thing. Also, I saw one of your questions is in regards to the vanishing seventh part of the Chronicle. Do you want me to comment on that? Because initially there were 7 episodes.
But yeah,
it's fairly simple, and also a question of a combination of design and discovery. I had this idea that the 6th installment should linger even more at let's say 2 legendary locations, not to spoil anything. And also there were some other places that I thought would be cool to explore or re-explore before tying it all up in the for the end. So that's one thing. The other thing is that what happened is that I discovered in the design process that I didn't need to have a lot of campaign or setting or GM material in the final book, meaning that I could basically cram together 2 adventures in one book. So that's what happened basically. And then not much were sort of discarded, not much at all. I got to shepherd the player characters to the important, for me, important places of the setting on their way to the final showdown. So no, I think it worked out just fine. So the initial projection was wrong. That's the best way to describe it.
But it's true that usually when you buy one volume of the campaign, you get like a GM part with a description of a place, or either this or hold, the plateau and so on. And in the last one, since you've pretty much explored everything, well, it's just, what are you going to do? And you can see like it's literally almost 200 pages of story.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. We are right now in the process of converting part 5 and 6 to 5e, and release them together in one tome. And we have done that for parts 1 and 2 and parts 3 and 4. The thing is, we could remove or relocate a lot of stuff in those first 4 episodes to other publications, such as the World of Symbaroum module, and also some to the Game Master's Guide and whatnot. but the final episode in the Throne of Thorns for 5e will be, I don't know, 350 to 400 pages, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be a big one.
It's going to be a workout equipment for the poor game masters reading it.
So that's good to know that Ruins of Symbaroum is is working well, because you've been adapting almost everything, and I think it was very smart to actually just compress the campaign and put the lore in one book, like, because I saw some comments like on forums where guys were like, this is great because like I'm not interested in the campaign, but I want a book with all the description of all the cities, and that's I mean,
no, I mean we really, or I needed to develop the setting one episode after another. So I couldn't have written the World of Symbaroum simultaneously with Thistlehold. That wouldn't have been possible, mainly because we did this initially on our spare time and whatnot. It took quite a while before we actually had some kind of living wage from working with Symbaroum. So in the beginning it was, we had to publish or perish, as they say.
They say. And it's a quite a strange question, but someone asked me, and I quote, it's directly translated from French, like, which values would you like players to take from Symbaroum? So, and he used the term values, so I suppose it's, I don't know, like, I don't know.
No, I think one of the most important things, whatever you are involved in creatively these days, is not to enforce the concept of black and white. And that is something that I share with my colleagues at Free League, and we feel really strongly about. Of course, we have our individual values and morals, but more than anything, trying to more or less degree Symbaroum to a more degree, because it's a bit more aimed at adults, right? At grown-ups. We try to instill some kind of understanding that we all are creatures of perspectives that roam around in the world with loads of contradictory perspectives, and yeah, that is basically the most important thing for me. Then you can definitely argue that there is some, because I saw someone call it the Greenpeace RPG. We shouldn't laugh at it because it's a super important topic.
No, I mean, yeah.
But for us, it has never. It's more. It's not about the fight when it comes to Symbaroum, at least, but about the principle and the question. And I you know, what are we doing to nature and how will it respond? What kind of relationship do we have? And at least you know, raise those questions, not necessarily give people answers all the time. I think one story that I quite often hear from gaming groups after playing Symbaroum is that the story when they return from an adventure feeling like heroes, and they get back to Thistlehold and they have a celebratory dinner and they go to the antique plaza and sell off their uh, finds from the forest, and then it slowly dawns on them the question, did we do the right thing, or are we really the heroes in this story? And when that happens, I feel that that Symbaroum is doing what it's intended to do. But I mean, that's 99% up to the gaming group, and very much to the game master, of course. So we can only provide some form of framework. This is, yeah, it's maybe self-evident, but I love pointing it out that if you have fun with Symbaroum, it's mainly your doing, even if we try to provide the tools for
And I think
it.
those are great tools. Even, I mean, Martin Grip illustration, of course. Like for many people, when I try to, you know, make my players say, okay, are you interested in this? And I show them the illustration. They're like, yeah, okay, I can. I don't know exactly what's going on. I don't know why they're all wearing masks and so on, but it looks great. And of course, well, being French, we're very big into in Japanese animation. Like Mononoke is like just
Yeah,
around the corner. And it's like, okay, I'm game. Let's try that. And no, it's really interesting. Also, you're speaking of tools, and there's so many little boxes with optional rules and what's not, travel rules. It's like it's a whole toolbox basically where you can, as a GM, do whatever you want if you want to complexify the whole process or not,
yeah.
or just stay.
And I also try to include, because it can be daunting for especially for new GMs, but try to include sort of tips on what to cut and how to. For instance, there are a lot of gaming groups out there, especially young players that aren't super comfortable taking the initiative in the story. And then obviously you need to have some form of quest giver, so you as a game master can control the narrative, at least to some extent, and trying to provide the new GMs also with some kind of more step by step, this is how you can play out the story is I think super important. But yeah, you have a point there. I mean, I think playing Symbaroum as an experienced game master helps. Yeah.
Definitely. And well, it's a bit going back up on the books. I was really surprised to see that Agrella was the next book
Oh, yeah.
release. Like, didn't expect at all. And plus, there is a campaign in it which is very small scale, but still with like well, the whole point is kind of to help preserve the city, and it's really interesting. So I'm kind of asking myself, what's going to be the next step? You know, in
What are you going to publish for Symbaroum? If you can say it, of course. I don't want to
Yeah.
get in trouble, but
This is one of the first times I'm talking about it publicly. We will, and I can't say very much now. Announcements will follow by the end of this year. As you may or may not know, 2026 is the 10-year anniversary of Symbaroum. So there may be some announcements coming up.
nice.
but when it comes to Agrella, it was actually one of the first regions that I wanted to explore, but for various reasons it didn't happen in like 2014 or something like that, 15, when we started. We released in Swedish about a year before we released in English. We are, because as you have Game Master, Davokar Awakens, you are fully aware that the very last header in that book is called Farewell Davokar. And long story short, it doesn't mean that you need to take a farewell, more or less fond of the Davokar region, but since the ending of that campaign is open and can have such massive consequences for how the Davokar region turns out, which I think is the whole point of playing an epic role-playing games campaign. We, as a creative team, will start to look in another direction, and we have actually decided now where we will end up and when we will end up. So that is something I actually can tell you. We will travel to the city-states.
Nice.
Which is in the pretty far from Ambria. It's not like walking distance. It's basically, I guess you can say, I'm trying to find from Poland to not maybe Portugal, say Germany to Portugal or something like that. It's quite a distance.
Yeah.
And we will find ourselves at about 20 years after the events of the Throne of Thorns. This is not 100% decided, maybe a little bit earlier. And always it will be, of course, possible for game masters and gaming groups to say that, no, this is only 4 years after, because we want to bring our players or player characters to this new setting. So then they will not be 100 years old. So, but the idea is that some time has passed, and it will start with what do they say in Fifth Element? Big bada boom. And then we will have a series of adventures, of course. So first up is a campaign of setting book, very much like the world of Symbaroum, which is describing the Davokar region, but we will have a new one describing the city-states, with not only geography and special locations and characters and whatnot, but also a few new concepts. If you have read the report 220108, that is free to download from our Symbaroum page, which is sort of an in-game spy report by the Ambrian Royal Secretarium. Mm-hmm. You might know that the city-states are pretty apt when it comes to alchemy. I mean, the sapper weapons and such actually were developed in the city-state. So that will be a sort of new rules addition here. We will also have, because one of the reasons alchemy is so big is that magic is more or less, for historical reasons, not only frowned upon, but Yeah, it's basically like the city-state of Lindaros.
Yes, I was
There
going to
was
say
like prohibited magic. So, but there is kind of magical tradition that's called astromancy that will have its own section as well. And then you will have sort of the run up to a campaign that in this case will not be made up of, I don't know, it's like 600,000 words, the Throne of Thorns. So that because I that would probably kill us, and specifically me. So we will probably see a campaign that is as epic, but that may, because of the setting and how it is defined, it will not be as much of exploration and such. It will be more focused on mystery, we can say, and some definitely some you will get to explore, and you will get to those get to have those, hopefully, I hope, sense of wonder moments when you but yeah, so I am definitely not ready today to announce when this will release, but it's safe to say that at least the year 2026 is a good guess.
yeah. So of course, it's kind of touchy to talk about that because sometimes I don't want also to antagonize your work and the work of your team, but there's been some, let's say, complaints about sometime, balance in gaming term. And, people saying, oh, I'm going to do an errata, and it's like 12 pages long. So are you thinking of like doing an update? I don't know, 1.5 rule set or something?
Yeah, that is also something that we are working on right now. I don't know exactly what I can tell you. One thing is that we will see 4 books become 3. So the advanced player's guide will be, the material in that one will be more or less divided between the core book and the game master's guide,
Okay.
where we think stuff
Awesome.
makes most sense. And that is something that I've already started doing. We will also rearrange the core book somewhat. It will still be, and this is to us at Free League very important, it will be an all-in-one core book. So basically, to start playing, you will only need the core book.
Nice.
You will have some monsters and some adventure material, and actually a little bit more of that in the new core rule book. So you can just using that start building your own explorations and excursions into the forest of Davokar. When it comes to, we will do some tweaks to the rules, but it will not be our aim to make, like in some or maybe a lot of other fantasy role-playing games, that basically we will guarantee that all player characters will be equally strong. And I'm a very strong advocate for that principle, because I loved when I was young, and I still kind of enjoy to creating a sidekick, or to creating a character with weaknesses, at least. I think that makes it more interesting for me. So the balance in Symbaroum is, as I explained a couple of times before, our main idea is that the game master should have an easy time balancing the player group against the opposition. So, and that is why the all NPCs basically follow the same rules and have access to the same mechanics as the player characters. Then there are some abilities maybe that we will, and this is something we have done from the start. We have a quite meaty errata available that shows the development. I think we are in English, we are on the 7th or 8th print run now. So, and a lot of those have seen some kind of iteration in terms of rules and guidelines, and also trying to clarify how we have thought about this and that, and so on. Obviously, also we are Swedish and English is not our first language. So there have been some needs to make small changes along the way. So, but there it will not be a new rule set. We will
Okay.
not. Symbaroum will be Symbaroum, and I mean, for us, making house rules, it's like I don't even see it as criticism, because you can create a setting that almost everyone enjoys, or at least feels the same about. You can create a setting that almost everybody hates as well. But when it comes to the game rules, it is so much a question of play style and your role play history. I would guess that most people fell in love with the first system they really got into, and then they compare everything they meet thereafter with that. So no, yeah, I don't think we will ever have the ambition to try to create the perfect role-playing game system. We will make a system that we ourselves enjoy playing, and then yeah, we do listen and we do try to make it better, especially if we hear arguments that are like, yeah, that is totally how we also want to have it. But we will always listen to ourselves first, and then we are super happy if other people, share our taste.
I was wondering about the way the books are, the layout. For
Mm?
example, lore tend to be scattered all around the books. Uh, I was wondering if it was like a natural process where you wanted, to put some flavor text. For example, Aroleta
Mm.
sayings, which is a big thing for witches, and because they know it's like Heraclit, right?
Mm.
Heraclit the obscure. No one
Yeah.
has the text, but they have like the maxim, the mottos, and so
Mm.
on. Like you don't go in the same river twice, and so on. And I always thought it was like that, but sometimes there's some information like which can be crucial for the
Yeah.
end of the game, and I'm like, oh, actually, I missed that. Like there was a saying, or there was like a prophecy or
Yeah.
something in the advance guide, and so I
Yeah,
was
but
wondering.
that is also a little bit kind of Easter eggs. I knew when I wrote the core book, the I didn't write that myself, only because Mattias Lilja wrote most of the rules and game master guidance, and he also wrote the adventure. But when it comes to the lore and the setting information and so on, I planted some stuff that I knew I was going to wanna see resurface later in the campaign. So yeah, that is totally true. But on the other hand, you there is nothing, I would argue, of that type of information
Yeah.
that is crucial to have from the start.
Yeah, I mean, you can just follow the campaign, and
Yeah.
it's not a problem. It's just that maybe it's my fault. I shouldn't have done that, but I've done a 2 hours video where I try to recap the entire history of Symbaroum and what was
Yeah.
before Symbaroum, and I went insane because for the Ordo Magica, for example, I was like, okay, I know that Seldonio created it, tac tac tac. I know that Queen Furiae, and then in Davoka Awakens, they're like, wait, there is a third person, and I'm like, what? Okay, but it was very fun. I mean, the process, obviously, like the thing I love most about Symbaroum, myself
Mm.
personally, in terms of the lore, is the fact that it's like a never-ending cycle
Mm.
between of course, nature, civilization, and corruption. It's to
Yeah.
go fast. And it's like when your players finally get that, they're like, oh, it's really strange because uh, Embria is new, but before that it was this little kingdom, and they did
Yeah.
some mistake, and before that it was the city states of Lindaros, and they did some mistake, and so on and so. And at the end they're like, wait a minute, like we've been doing the same thing for like thousands of years. Maybe we should try a new approach. And I thought it was
Do
great.
you know there are actually creatures who do remember and who has mended their ways? Can you think of who that might be?
um I would say this, no, I'm not sure. Like I would say the spirits, but the spirits is a special case. So
Yeah.
no, I guess it's from the monster manual or one of those creatures, the darklings maybe.
I'm struggling with myself now. Should I reveal this?
I can
Yeah,
feel
I
it.
should. I should. I should.
Okay.
The elves.
Mm,
They actually started out making the same mistakes that the humans are so famous about.
okay.
But the thing is, they live so long, so they actually do remember what happened when they delved too greedily and too deep.
Okay.
Humans, we have a short memory. It's like 2 generations after the disaster, we start forgetting and start making the same mistakes again. That
It's
is,
it's funny
yeah.
because one of my players actually had another theory. For him, it was like the reason humans get corrupted and like they keep doing the same mistake
Mm.
is because they don't have a life cycle. Like for him, it was like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
let's take
yeah.
the spiders. The spiders, they can grow big and
Mm,
they have their place in the world. The bestials,
mm,
well, we don't see much of them, but they have the place. And like and you have the, well, goblin life cycle, to not spoil too much. And
mm.
his theory was like, well, since everything has a place in the world, humans are the only ones who are just, do not change basically. And I thought it was
I
interesting.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. That's a
You know,
beautiful idea, and I'm sure that there are quite a lot of scholars in the world of Symbaroum who would argue that that's true. That is the actual reason why
it's,
humans behave the way they do. Yeah,
yeah,
why not?
it was
Mm.
interesting, I thought. So I got last technical question, and then I'll go for the spoilerishy, like my questions, basically. Um, was it difficult because we know now that there's so many games that are being adapted to Dungeon and Dragon 5th
Mm.
edition. Like for example, one of my favorite games of all time I got there is Midnight, which I thought was a brilliant settings for Dungeon and Dragon 3rd
Ah,
edition,
yeah, yeah.
which is basically this what if Sauron won in Middle Earth, and
Mm.
actually it's much smarter than that. And when I bought like the 5th edition just to see what was new, I was kind of disappointed. Like lots of
Ah.
junky. So my question is, what were the main challenges that you encountered? Because as you said, you created a rule set which is very specific with corruption,
Yeah.
magic system, and like. So what were the?
No, but I mean, we didn't want to change too much because the Ruins of Symbaroum, the 5e version, is for players who love the D&D system. For players that want something else, there is the original Symbaroum system, right? So we but we needed to make some tweaks to the rule set to mirror the theme of the game, and as you already mentioned, corruption is, I mean, that's the one mechanic that sort of captures what Symbaroum is. So, and that spills over in the new rest mechanic, where it takes a lot more before you can regain hit points and so on. It spills over in the magic system, where you don't have spell slots, but you have corruption to limit your ability to cast. And it's also mirrored in that, and that was super easy to translate to 5e, the system of shadows and spiritual shadows, and feats like which sites and so on. So no, I'm, and the cool thing is that Jacob Rogers, who is the brain behind the conversion, he has done a lot of work in 5e over the years, and also before that in D20. And he also had played and game mastered Symbaroum, the original system. So it was a perfect match. And Jacob, if you're listening, man, I can't thank you enough, because I could never have done this. And Mattias Lilja, maybe, but he doesn't really have that much time because he has another day job. So yeah, no, that's I don't know what more to say. I'm super happy with the result, even if it's, as people point out, it's very different from the original Symbaroum game, but it has to be, because it's not for people who love the original Symbaroum game. It's for 5e people who want a deadlier, deeper, darker, deadlier setting.
No, yeah, definitely. It's interesting. And I was just wondering, like, do the entire Jan Ringen staff is it a part-time job? Like, are some of you guys like full-time writers, or do you?
And now, since 2018, as you may know, we have merged with some friends of ours. So now we are called Free League. And in Free League, we are basically we are a group of nerds who also run a company, and so far we are able to make a living of it, and that's pretty new. Say that about the time of the pandemic, the turn of 2019, 2020, there somewhere, it started going so good that we could have a decent salary.
That's great, because
and today we also have a lot of Symbaroum or Free League is still a small company, but we do have a lot of freelance contacts that work with us on not only one project but on several, such as layout artists, and among them Johan Noor, who made Mörkborg later, but who started out making the layout for Symbaroum.
Okay.
And people helping us with events and with our web shop and whatnot. So we are quite a team nowadays.
I know it's like in France, actually it's a struggle for most of the publisher, because except from Edge and Asmodee, which are like the big ones, most of them they have a day job, or it's almost not paid at all. Well, the production value is very good, and of course some other have also issues regarding where are you going to produce your books. If you stay in Europe, it's more expensive, but it's stay in Europe. If you go to China, then it's so it's really incredible what you guys did, because I knew back in my Erasmus day when I was a student, and I met some Swedish guy, and it turns out they were like role-playing gamers like me, and they said, oh, but we have Drakas and Demoner and and I was okay, so Sweden is like big into tabletop. I didn't know that, because for me the whole scope was Chaosium, Dungeons and Dragons, and so on. And when Free Liga started to be translated in France, it was quite a shock, because you guys arrived with, well, of course, Symbaroum, Coriolis, but like big hitters like Alien. It's like to have the IP Alien, and to make a very special game tailored with this cinematic experience, and now it's crazy. It's like at least, I mean, what I meant is like,
and again, I attribute this the story of Free League very much to the fact that we really go out of our way to do the games we want to play. And luckily for us, there are lots of gamers out there who share our taste in games. So yeah, it's you have to pinch yourself now and again just to see if you are awake.
Okay, so I think I'm going to go for the quick-paced but spoilerish question. So it's like one of the most famous Frenchmen, so General de Gaulle, once said, "Il n'y a pas de grandeur sans mystère." So it means like there is no majesty without mystery. So I'm sure there's some question you're not going to answer because at the end of the book, I remember he said, "Let's keep it quiet, guys." So it's okay. But it's so like the biggest for me, of course, it's Uron, which is quote quote the antagonist, the shadow beneath Symbar, and I was wondering how did she get corrupted in a sense because like the creation of the Symbarian Empire, like dwarves, giants, well, they were made from our scales and the world serpent, and they are like the rule set of those guys is like, oh, they can't get corrupted because, well, so
I think the answer is quite simple and maybe a little bit disappointing. I think that the question, I think the dwarves' origin story is a fable. I don't think they were born out of Uron. I think their origin is a little bit more dark than that. Maybe. Anyway, the reason why Uron has been corrupted is because she's a monster who has been laying dormant beneath Symbar during and for a long time after the Battle of Symbar, which released enormous amounts of corruption that later seeped down through the bedrock. So you have basically, Fufar, the destroyer. Yeah, that's
my
another
players remember.
example. Yeah, who we meet a bit earlier in the campaign, or can meet, which is another example of these more or less godly creatures that is not or are not immune to corruption.
It's funny because the scariest part for the player were not Euron, not Fufar the Destroyer, and so on. Even if they were like godly beings, as you said, it was the blood elves. Like they were really scared the shit out of them because they said, okay, you have smart, corrupted or undead, whatever elves that are roaming around, like kind of like the boogeyman, basically. And they were really scared of that.
Then you played them good. Then you played them well. Yeah.
It's really funny. Like sometimes when you read something and you play it, it's so different because you have the whole picture. The players don't, so they expect some stuff to be very scary or not, and it's really cool. Like I really like that. That's why at the end of the campaign, I asked the player to make like a little debrief because I wanted to know like what was the best moment for them or the worst and so on because it's not the same for you as a GM.
No.
Okay, so I know I'm doing a fixation on that, but like the Ordo Magica. So from what I understood, it's basically they were priests. They were part of the theocracy of the young gods when they arrived down south. And one day they say maybe there's another paradigm possible for magic, and those guys were like Seldonio, Queen of Furiae, and the Stormweaver.
Not really sure that it is said somewhere that they were part of the founders. Does it?
I think I'm not sure. Like I don't have the books with me, but I was digging into that, and
this is actually something that I would need to and I definitely if I was to write anything more on that topic, I would definitely check it up. No, the thing is that
that's okay.
at least on the basics of it is that wizardry developed out of the older forms of theurgy, and it did so by people who turn to philosophy rather than to religion in trying to explain how these forces work. So, and exactly who were part of that process, if
Okay,
they are
but,
alive, we don't dare.
I'm
But
just
maybe I think it rings a bell when you say that there is someone mentioned in like Davokar Awakens or
yeah,
something like that.
it's the
Yeah,
Stormweavers, like the
yeah,
different
yeah, yeah,
allies that you can have
yeah.
at the boss. And,
Mm.
well, I mean allies.
They in any case, during the time of the Great War against the Dark Lords, all
Mm.
these uh, uh, they were actually titled archmages.
Okay, that's why.
Yeah, uh, and but that title was removed when they got to
Yeah,
reestablish themselves in Umbria.
of course
Yeah.
it's. And speaking of cosmogony and the gods themselves, because
Mm.
as you said, everything is a point of view, and we know with human history usually that
Mm.
all gods tend to be shaped. I mean, I lived 5 years in Ireland, and most of the saints in Catholicism are like old pagan god, like Saint
Yeah.
Bridget was like the goddess of fertility and so on. And the saints usually are old divinity. So are
Come
the
on.
yeah, like
Don't feel embarrassed. I love these questions.
I mean, are the gods real? Because we know that back in the day, they were like those kind of animals which were kind of Princess Mononoke, very powerful, like the sun cat and so on. And maybe they evolve in different something, but do they exist, or are they just concepts? In general.
Are we talking what? Are we talking Prios?
No, I'm thinking about because for me at least, Prios is just like another name for Lisa, the sun cat.
Yeah.
Or the
Mm.
Oroke, the spider
So
god, or
you're referring to the young gods.
yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
the pantheon of the young gods, which is actually older than Prius. So yeah, but they are still very much younger than the more brutish kinds of gods that came before, and that you will learn to know a little bit more about in the city states. Anyway, no, they are not real.
okay. Wow, so that takes care of.
What the thing is, they could be real because what they represent are real, and the effects of people believing in them is
Yeah,
very much real. Um, and there is obviously some kind of force of creation that the witches call it Wyrtha, right? The Ambrians call it Prios. And then basically the pantheon of the young gods is like, it's basically the same power but divided into domains. So there is something there,
okay.
and because that's another question: if theurgs, witches, wizards, are they drawing from the same source, or are they tapping into different sources of power? And what I want to say with this reasoning is that as a designer, I don't need to decide this, because I will not do. There will never be an adventure where you meet Prius, not of our design. So I don't need to decide this. Uh, Depending on what kind of stories you want to tell at your table, you can definitely make your own interpretation of what the young gods are, or what Prius are, and all the deities of the barbarian clans, the clan folks. So yeah.
Okay. So I guess the spirits are something kind of different, like Eox, the
Yeah.
bull god and so on. That because
I would think that Eox, Uron, uh, Garavarax, there are a few others. They were probably inhabitants of this world before humans arrived.
yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe before the elves woke up. Uh, but they are. You have Gylta also. The sow in sow. How do you say it?
Oh yeah,
The wild boar. In one of the adventure packs. So yeah.
okay. And um, was the idea of course, Aluin being this incarnation of
Oh,
Wielda? Was it like just a stroke of luck, like things happen basically, or was it like kind of a gambit because he has a
well,
very,
you know Aluin, so you know that yeah, anything can happen. That's like
of course,
the thing with Wyrtha, and we will actually get to know Wyrtha a whole lot better when we come to the city states,
okay,
because we are you know the archipelago,
yeah,
uh, that's said to be like all chaotic Wyrtha. We are closing in on that,
okay,
so that there will be some new mechanics on that side of the system as well. Anyway, Aluin. Um, I basically for me he he is important as a representative of Wyrtha because he shows very clearly that the the elves are not the creatures of creations. They are defenders of creation, as I said earlier, and that is because they remember what actually, they have this wisdom of the
yeah,
ages, uh, that actually they can access the common uh, memory and knowledge bank, whatever, of the elven folks. Uh, Meaning that they remember what happened when they behaved like humans tend to behave, so
mm,
they want to stop it. They base, many of them basically view humans as a plague, right? So Aluin shows very clearly that elves are also a part of Wielda. All sentient cultural beings are basically on the side of Wielda in this uh, triptych, or whatever you call it. Uh, you have to be extremely otherworldly to really represent Wyrtha. So that's his story, and I firmly believe that Allah, his mother, this nature spirit, she felt that he needed to be born, and so she's or they seduced our dear friend, Father Sarvola.
poor Savola.
Yeah, poor Sarvola.
And well, I mean, the last question I have, which is you're going to tell me, I guess, the same idea, but there's always, when you're reading the part about Eru, about the throne, about, you're wondering, okay, if the humans were in the Yonderworld, is the Yonderworld the birthplace for human? And personally, I don't think so, because that doesn't match the cyclic
Mm.
thing, but I guess every one answer is good as mine.
You are totally correct. I don't know either. If they came from somewhere else before, I know that Auro is like the last high culture of that world, the so-called Yonderworld, before humans had to evacuate, basically. But the earlier history of humor, maybe we'll get an answer further down the road. Uh, we'll see. I've toyed with the idea to make a Symbaroum setting that is sort of placed in another time, maybe in the time of Symbaroum, or in even earlier, or yeah. So we'll see. We're not done creating stuff for Symbaroum yet.
Interesting. Well, that's good to know that there's still, new books, new modules coming up. It's great to know. Like it's a very lovely setting. As you said, didn't know that it was the 10th anniversary of the original book, so that's it's really cool to know that.
The English translation,
Yeah, at least. Okay.
And that is also a bit of news, is that Symbaroum going forth, it will lose its Swedish roots in some sense, because it will be written in English directly.
Okay.
So maybe translated to Swedish at a later stage, but it feels a little bit. It's very much work for quite a little reward, because all Swedes are pretty good at reading English, so they should be able to play it.
They are.
I hope they will.
But unfortunately, that's not the case of most of the people from down south of Europe, which we still need.
No, but you have very rich language cultures of your own. I mean, we are 10 million people. That's like London, you know.
It's funny because usually I only read in books in English and play with the English books, and sometimes the translation I have to put up is really hard, because obviously English is a very universal language, and you have to improvise or make it Frenchify it in a way, and it's quite a struggle sometimes. But that also kind of the funny part, I guess. So, well, at least you seem very busy, because I saw that your name was in the Kickstarter for the Book of Magic in Dragonbane. It's coming up.
Yeah, currently I am writing the Book of Magic together with Mattias Lilja and Thomas Härenstam. So yeah, it will be cool. I also was part of the Monster Codex, or it's called the Bestiary, right?
It's a Bestiary. We are eagerly waiting for this one.
So and I also wrote one of the adventures, or but developed and modernized one of the adventures in the Path of Glory campaign for Dragonbane. So it's been quite a lot of Dragonbane recently. And it feels, after the Throne of Thorns, you have to excuse me, but I needed to breathe a little bit, to take a small break.
I understand. Like after the campaign, the Throne of Thorns, I wanted just to do one shots and so on. So I bought the starter book for Dragonbane, and I'm gaining some data green, like just one shot, smaller type of thing, not like the big epic.
No,
because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is, but hopefully rewarding.
Yeah, no, it's good memories, good fun. That's all you can hope for a game. Well, I guess that's pretty much what I had to ask you. So once again, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, you're so very welcome. It's super important also for me to remind myself why I'm doing this, and I will I will definitely tell my friends too, because instead of writing novels or whatever, working with role-playing games is so much fun because of this joint venture.
Back and forth.
Yeah, and the joint venture, you create something that others co-create and then bring to the table, and then a third thing happens in that environment. And thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.